Welcome to More Than a Coach. Coaching is more than physically getting athletes to perform. Coaches put so much more into what they do with athletes. There's mental, there's emotional, and personal well being that must be taken into account. Coaches help athletes and people get from where they are to where they can be. We're more than coaches. Welcome to More Than a Coach. Welcome, Tianna. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Me too. Thank you for having me.
And we have a special guest. We have a college athlete on the line as well, Samaya Samuels, who I have had the pleasure of coaching in the past. And I thought it would be a great show to bring these two together. Everybody has this potential in them. There's many people who have Olympic gold medals that they will never realize in their lives because the right relationships and information has not been shared with them. And so I want to make sure that we take this opportunity to bring out the best in Samaya and every athlete out there who may be right there on the brink of a breakthrough, because Tianna has been through that personally. And if she had given up or if she had not found the right tools to get over that hump, then maybe we wouldn't even know her name. Maybe she would not be known as that three-time Olympic medalist, Tianna Bartoletta. So let's talk about the tears and the emotional stress of being an athlete. Not just being an athlete, but the emotional stress of our regular lives and how that spills into our performance life. And, there's a big thing, like even last night, I saw another athlete post about anxiety attacks before races. Have you ever experienced anxiety that spilled over into your performances?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's because I was existing in a very unique experience where my off the track relationship and marriage were abusive and toxic. And a lot of it was triggered by how I performed on the track. So for me, coming home after losing a race was not a good or safe place for me to be. And so I would go to the track like, I need to win this race. Like,
Wait, what do you
I
mean? So
I
you would
mean
come
that
home and there would be repercussions from not performing well?
absolutely in some kind of way there would be an issue between us for losing. A lot of times it was like, what was that? Do you not love me enough? Oh, it's because you're too fat. You need to look more like this athlete. And they'll pull up pictures from Google Images and compare my body to an athlete that performed better than me. And that was just kind of the way it went for me. And so I had a different level of anxiety when I would come into a meet because it was like, win and have a great evening, go out to eat, have your glass of wine, everything's
Mhm.
chill, lose, and who the heck knows what's going to happen. So I carried that to the line all the time while I was in that relationship. And so I am very familiar with that. At the same time, I also understand the process of how to get to that win. And so that is what I allowed myself to focus on. So even though that anxiety was there and I could not get rid of it, I didn't waste a lot of energy trying to get rid of that anxiety. I spent that energy because energy is finite. There's no unlimited like source of energy, right? That we're coming in with. So I chose to take that energy and focus it on, okay, since I need to win, or since I really need to win this thing, let me focus on executing all these little steps to give myself the best chance at winning. And then the anxiety is taken care of because I tended to the process that would alleviate that anxiety instead of the reverse, which I see a lot of younger athletes doing, is focusing on the anxiety, trying to manage the anxiety and, really cater to it rather than, why don't you address the things that are address the thing that is scaring you the most, that is fueling the anxiety, and just kind of let the anxiety sit there for a little bit. Just let it be. It's going to be there, and
Mhm.
focus on the things that'll help you walk towards the goal.
How did you get to that point? Like, something had to happen to where, at first you're dealing with the anxiety and it's becoming overwhelming and you're not dealing with it well. What was the aha moment that helped you get from that point to understanding to focus on the little steps? Was it a person? Was it something your coach did?
Well, I had a mental conditioning coach. I've almost always had somebody who functioned as the mental coach for me. And during that time, they I wasn't being honest about like what my life was like fully, but they knew enough to know that I was managing a lot of stress, managing depression. And so our sessions were very practical. They weren't like know your why and like run for a larger, like I wasn't trying to hear none of that. Like I'm trying to survive.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Exactly.
they were very practical things. Like his name is Josh Lifrak, and actually after we got world number one and world championship title together, he was hired by the Cubs and then they won the World Series. So like he's really good at his job. He would sit me down and be like, okay, when we're on the long jump runway, what's the first thing that you need to do good? Like, what's the first thing? Then what's the next right thing? Then the next right thing? Then the next right thing. And so I had a list, which I called the execution checklist, which I memorized. And so in a competition, and particularly the long jump, when you got a lot of downtime, and if you're watching the competition, you're rising and for, oh man, she just took the lead. Oh my gosh, she just jumped 7 meters. You can like rise and fall. Instead,
Mm-hmm.
I am essentially chanting my execution checklist to myself. It's the only thing playing on a loop in my head. So by the time I get on the runway and take my next jump, all I hear is what I have to do, and the thing after that, and the thing after that. And so when you're struggling with all of those emotions and riding the waves of nerves, anxiety, fear, honestly, the best thing to do is take all of the emotion out of it and become a scientist. What do I have to do and how do I do it? None of the feelings go away, but you just redirect your focus for a little while. And then you'll notice that those feelings are managed and you don't have to worry about them.
Sound familiar, Samaya?
Yeah, it does. It
So in
sounds
high
very
school,
familiar.
Samaya was like a phenomenal jumper, and there's been, and a lot of athletes go through this transition from high school to collegiate.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but sometimes also it's we're not doing the mental work. You know, you did so much mental work in high school, and then you get to college, and you're only relying on the physical work, and the physical work
Yeah.
alone is not going to be enough. You know the things
Right.
that you did to get to where you were, and you stopped doing them.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, Tiana, like, how long, well, you say you always had one. Did you start having one when you first started track, or were you saying like in college more so, or is it more on an elite level you started getting a mental coach? When did you realize that that's something that you needed?
So my father is a martial artist. And his school that he practices with is like on the ancient side, like respect the ancestors, do your chants, do your meditations. So I grew up in a home where my dad understood the power of the mind and your ability to focus and have a singular focus. So he
Mhm.
essentially was my very first mental toughness coach, just because of his lifestyle, like
I
how a
can
fighter needs
relate
to
to
enter the
that
ring.
a
Yeah,
lot.
that's
My
that's
father
where
is
I
like
learned that.
that.
Yeah. And then
Okay.
in college, as a team, we saw a sports psychologist. Um,
That's nice.
Originally, it was because the whole coaching staff was new, and the team that had been recruited by the previous coaching staff was really struggling with getting used to the new one and their new teammates. And so we would all, it
Mhm.
was almost group therapy. We were all in there complaining about each other and everything with the
That's
therapist.
good
And
though.
then,
I
yeah, it was
mean, in a
great. And
way, yeah.
we had breakout one-on-one sessions, and I began to work with Dr. Joe Whitney on visualization and what I need to think about. We worked on this so much that when I got to world championships my sophomore year, I was not surprised. I had rehearsed that jump so
Yes.
many times before that point that I didn't even react properly after the win. It was like, oh, I'm supposed to celebrate. Yay! It was like, because I had been there already. And then as a pro, I knew that that was something that I needed to continue, except I didn't know that mental conditioning coaches existed at the time. I knew about sports psychologists and regular therapists, both of which I maintained even during my down years. And then once I
Mhm.
got elite level again, like my second coming, then I started to have a mental conditioning coach, which is pretty much like a sports psychologist minus that specific degree.
Right.
Okay.
Which is kind of, Samaya, everything that she just described, is it not what we did in preparation?
Yes. In high school, and I've lacked on doing it when I got to college, but in high school, Coach Gibson with the team, we did a lot of watching film and a lot of looking at different like athletes and their experiences and writing down how we feel and writing about doing a lot of affirmations and a lot of visualizations to the point where, like you said, when it was time for me to compete in a big competition, I already knew that that was going to happen. Like even a big competition that I can remember in high school that was one of my favorite competitions was at New Balance when I broke the long jump record. And the jump before I was about to break the record, it was like I was like in tunnel vision where I had already seen what was going to happen like
Yeah.
after the jump. So when I jumped, like immediately, like unlike you, but immediately like my hands went up. I was like, boom, like I know that's a far jump. I already like I know I just did it on that jump. And it was just like I felt it previously when we would talk about it and we would visualize it with me doing and Coach Gibson doing it one-on-one. So that's something that a lot of athletes don't do today. Like a lot of athletes don't visualize and don't do like affirmations and don't, talk about, goals and like make them reality today. And I think that's what a lot of college sports is missing because we don't really have that mental conditioning like that's needed. So that's really something that I think a lot of people need to bring awareness to, especially in track and field.
I wish
Yeah.
more programs had it in their budget, to have mental conditioning
Yeah.
coaches. Like you said,
Yeah.
Tianna, some mental conditioning coaches are, just as effective as a sports psychologist, if not more, because some of us have the experience in the sport that's more relevant than the book knowledge. And so it's just something that I think is more needed, not just because of the visualization and everything for performances, but like you said, someone that we can connect people to that they're comfortable talking to about experiences at home, whether it be a sports psychologist or a mental conditioning coach. But those issues there needs to be systems in place to where when someone is not performing well, our first inclination is not to work them out harder, but maybe have somebody that we have them sit down with and talk through things, because there may be things that they're going through that they're not comfortable talking to the coach about, or that they feel they'll be judged if they bring up. Or sometimes there's so much guilt. People feel guilty for feeling what they feel. Like we live in a world of toxic positivity to where everybody feels like I just have to always act like everything is great. I have to use these
I hate that
motivational
so
quotes.
much. I hate that
I
so much.
hate
Like,
it.
I'm not okay. I'm not enjoying
Yeah.
it. I'm not
This is
happy.
not fun. I'm not.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm still working hard, but no, I'm not
Yeah.
enjoying this ride.
Yeah.
Okay? Thank you.
Right. I didn't sleep last night, or I'm not
Yeah.
eating well. I'm stressed.
Yeah.
But if we say we're stressed, then people will be like, you ain't got nothing to be stressed about. Get on the line.
Yeah.
We
Yeah,
have to change that.
I had a follower comment after I made a video for suicide awareness, suicide prevention. And it was a hard story to kind of tell because there's still stigma around people who have attempted suicide or, think about those things. So sharing it wasn't easy already in the first place. So after it's maybe a 5-minute video, whatever it is, the comment was, "You're too pretty to be depressed." Or, and then another, "If I had those gold medals, I wouldn't have anything to be depressed about." And so that is also part of the reason athletes struggle, because we have to hear like, "Oh, you're getting your college paid for. You got a full ride. You got this, you got that. What are you upset about? What are you stressed about? You can eat whenever you want to. Just go down to the cafeteria. Like, I have to, like, I don't know when I'm gonna get my next meal, but you're good. So I'm not really trying to hear about your experience." That's kind of what we're all going through. And so you want to kind of choke it down sometimes. It's really important to have somebody in your corner, like a therapist, mental conditioning coach, sports psychologist who you can say these things to, because these things affect your performance as well.
Yeah.
Extremely. Yeah.
Can you relate, Samaya, at all?
A lot. I can relate a lot. A lot of people looked at me coming out of college, say, already knew like, okay, you went to, you made two world teams and you have, your medals and you've met all these famous people and these famous Olympians. You shouldn't be stressed. You should already have the materials. Like you should already be here. You're not here now. Like what's wrong? You should already be like jumping 23 feet. Like what's going on? And it's just like, yes, I was blessed to, be in a situation to have all that, but there's other underlining factors that I'm still battling with, and it's kind of holding me back from getting there. So, I mean, you work through it, all athletes that really want to work through it, but it's not as easy as people make it seem. It's not
Yeah.
that easy. I grew up running track when I was 5, and my dad has always been my coach, and when he was a great coach and he's a great father and I love him to death, but it would be hard sometimes because when your father is your coach, you can't escape it, and your father's the one
Mm-hmm.
that feeds you, your father's the one that puts clothes in your back. So it's when things wouldn't go right in track and I would come home, it would kind of feel like I'm on punishment until I can recover and do well again. And even if he didn't
Mm-hmm.
make it seem like that, or he didn't, or if he meant well, it's just it's more stress that I put on myself because I want to make my father proud at the end of the day, and my coach. So
Mm-hmm.
it's hard. Um, but what would you say? Like, what are even to this day, it's kind of hard. Our relationship isn't as good as I would want it to be. So it's always been a struggle for me to kind of balance out having, a father and a coach at the same time and wanting to make both of them proud. So I don't know, whatever advice you would have on that, I would love to hear it because it's hard. And I don't want to outweigh one relationship other than the other because they're both important relationships to me. So yeah.
And I'm sure a lot of athletes out there can relate because I've talked to many athletes who, when I ask them about their goals and what they're trying to accomplish, a lot of it is because of what their parents have said. My dad said I should be doing this, or I can run this, or I can jump this, and I'm trying to do that. And it's like, well, I need you to focus on you and not so much the pressure from your parents. And I think a lot of that anxiety is exactly what you're talking about. You know, the parents are very well meaning and they see something potential in their child and they are doing the best that they can. But we even see it in other sports, basketball. What's the basketball players who got in trouble overseas? You know what I'm
The
talking about?
ball, the
The
ball
balls. And you know how
brothers.
the dad
Oh,
is so overly
Yeah.
involved, something. So it happens in every sport. The parents are, getting caught up in putting pressure on the athlete and sometimes living through their child. So did you have any experiences with your parents, Tianna, or any advice you have for athletes who are dealing with the pressures from their parents?
so I've had different experiences with my parents, but not necessarily in that way. My dad was also one of my coaches, but he also, I think, was mindful that we had to have our personal journeys at the same time. So I never really felt like he was lording his will for me over my life. And then on my with my mother, and they're both married, but it's just two very different experiences. You probably understand that.
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
I have always wanted her approval. She was just a hard woman to get and I am proud of you out of. And so like I was all about like trying to do everything higher than a 4.0 GPA, full ride to college, like every little thing. I became the overachiever just to get those little drips of like, good job, I'm proud of you. And like as a kid, I mean, we were just my mother and I's relationship is on the mend. It took a long time. We were estranged for 7 years. We did not speak to each other. And then now we're back. And just kind of reflecting. And I think as the book comes out, we'll have more reflecting and more healing and conversations. But we were laughing about how every other kid in school would bring their report card home and then they get money for their A's. And so thinking I was one of those kids too, bring my report card home and I'm like, I got like 5 A's. Is it $2 an A? I'm like trying to negotiate my rate for the A's, right? And she's just like, why would I pay you for something you're supposed to do? And she just kind of looked at me like, okay, and and I love the mentality because she's setting the bar high and the expectation, but I almost always was like, give me something. Give me
Yeah.
something. I'm gonna win this race. Give me something. And so yeah, I know what that feeling is like. I will say though, it's harder to do when you're younger, when you're still dependent on these people for your livelihood. It's a little bit easier to do when you're making your own money, you're not living there, all these things. But at the end of the day, their life is their life, and what they want for you is just what they prefer. Like, you don't have to indulge that. That's their business in a lot of ways. And where we often go wrong is we internalize their their stuff for us. And it's hard to make that separation, but if you can even just mentally say, okay, that's what you want for me versus what I want for me, acknowledge and listen to what they want while still honoring what you want, and just walk your path. So it's not like
Yeah.
you have to sit them down and be like, no, that's what you want. That's not what I want. It's more like you acknowledge them, because that's all people really want, is to be seen and heard, right? You acknowledge what their dreams are for you. You acknowledge that you understand where it's coming from and it's a good place. But then you also acknowledge your own. And I think the reason we end up struggling so much as we get older is because we neglect ourselves in order to serve that. And as
Exactly.
parents, they don't really want that for you. They just don't understand how it's being processed within you. So it requires a
Exactly.
conversation.
And
Yeah.
like you said, realizing that, like you just mentioned, that you're no longer in that household depending financially. So there is a separation mentally that you have to be able to make within yourself too. You know, you're still operating the same that you were in high school because it's been that mental conditioning that has happened. So you want to make sure that
Mhm.
you do like she said and realize, you know, even if it's not a conversation that you can convince them, you
Mm-hmm.
understand the boundaries that you have within yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it took me going to see a therapist to help me understand. She was just like, at this point in your life, you are choosing to perpetuate like the father, the parent child dynamic. Like, you're an adult now. You can opt out of like needing to defer to all of those things all the time. You haven't lived at home in like 7 years. You
Mhm.
haven't you've been financially independent since you were 19 years old, and yet every time I ask you a question, you're like, your mom, my mom, like, you can
Yeah.
opt out of that. But our social conditioning has us so much like, we can't do that, that we bring that on ourselves, is what I'm trying to say, to follow up on what Coach Gibbs is saying.
Right. And taking
Exactly.
ownership. You know,
Mhm.
when we are always looking at someone else as the cause for
Mhm.
what is happening in our lives, yes, they might have be a contributing factor, but they are not the cause.
Mhm.
You are in control of how you respond to the circumstances in your life. So, yes, you may not have the best relationship, you know, with certain people, but how do you respond to that relationship and how do you let that impact and influence how you perform? Because, Tianna, when you talked about your marriage, you know, you got to a point to where you were still in that bad relationship and then you
Mhm.
still did well. You still performed well because you took ownership for your performances and stopped letting it be dependent on what that person would do or say.
Absolutely. And to take it one step farther than that, I was in therapy during that time, throughout that time. And I went to my early sessions so ready to be like, and he does this and he does this. And Dr. Reno is her name, said, I need you to go get this book called Who's Pulling Your Strings. And then she said to me, you know who's pulling your strings. And so at this point, you're allowing them to be pulled. Like, so
Exactly.
who are we mad at right now? Who are we really mad at? Are we mad at the person who's pulling the strings, or are we mad at ourselves for allowing this to continue? And so I think I was able to continue to perform, like you said, at a high level because I finally was able to just look at what I was responsible for, what I could control and really just dive down that rabbit hole.
Right. And something you just said, I'm going to put you on the spot, Samaya. I told you to get the 4 agreements like a
Yes.
year ago. Did you ever read it?
I didn't finish it. I had borrowed the book
Girl,
from
that book is
someone.
so
It's
easy.
so little.
I know, but
But wait,
school,
let me make this point. Let me make this point. So Tiana's therapist told her to get a book. She got it. She read it and made progress. A lot of times too, we like tools and tips and resources are given to us and we don't follow through on it. And then we
yeah,
wonder why we're still in the same spot. So we have to take the steps to get ourselves out of that rabbit hole, to dig ourselves out of that hole. People who have been through the things that we've been through or talked to and worked with people to get through those things give us resources and we need to follow through on those.
This is the
yeah.
amazing point because I always say, if you really wanted to, you would. And people are like, oh, it's not
True.
that simple. And I'm like, but it is.
It is.
It
Yeah,
actually
it
is.
is.
If you really wanted to, you would. And so just like they say, with addicts, like they may relapse several times, but when they're really ready, they're done. And
Mm-hmm.
until then, they're not. And so it's like it's a thin line between like, okay, you haven't read the book because you're actually not willing to find out what it takes to fix that specific thing. But when you are, you will, and you'll make it happen. But until then, guess what? You have disqualified yourself from complaining about whatever that thing
Exactly.
that didn't
Yeah.
work out. Like the people who don't vote but criticize the government. It's
Yeah.
just like that. Like you have to be involved in your healing process, in the
Yeah.
things that will actually make a difference.
Coach Carl
I
said something
agree.
last week to you that was so phenomenal. He said that Samaya has almost a fear of like how great she could be. So if I do all of these things that people are telling me that's going to help me be great, and then I still like, what if I don't reach that level of what I could do? So it's almost like you self-sabotage some of the steps that you need to do because then you have an excuse for why you never reach that pinnacle of success.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yes.
It's a
I think
vulnerable position to like
yes.
train and work your butt off and then get to the meet and lose. And then like how are you supposed to process that? Like you did everything right. Like you did everything right. You showed up on time. You did all the training sessions and it still didn't work out. And it's a lot easier for weaker like minded athletes to go through that process at the end, lose and be like, well, yeah, if I would have just finished my rehab, everything would have been different if I could have done this, rather than be bold enough to be like, you know what? I did everything right. I showed up every day. I lost. What am I going to do? What are you going to do about it? I lost. I'll try again next time, or I'll graduate and move on to my profession. Like, whatever, like, it's okay. We act like there's this whole big parade of disappointment that's going to happen across the country when we don't make it work out. Like, how
Mm-hmm.
arrogant, egotistical of us to believe that that's what's going to happen when we lose. No one cares.
Yeah.
But go
Guess what?
all in
No
for
one actually
yourself.
cares.
Go all in for yourself. Like she's saying, do all of the things right. And then at least at the end of the day, because you only have this window of time to compete. You can't get to be my age and then be like, you know what, I want to go back and do it right because it's over. Not
Yeah.
everybody can compete at 40 something years old like Tom Brady, but most of us have that time to where, 25 years old, 30, 35 years old, you can still compete at a high level. But after that window,
Mm-hmm.
so give yourself the
So
chance so that you're
true.
not one of those people telling people, oh, I could have done this or I could have done that or I was supposed to do this. I came out of high school and I made it to the Olympic trials my senior year and then you never made it again. Or you're gonna be one of the people that you don't even have to tell them what you did. Tiana don't have to get on here and say, I got Olympic gold medals. They look at her and her reputation speaks for itself. They know what she did. So we're in a society of, I have to post and tell people what I'm doing. I have to post and make myself look relevant and important. But if
Yeah.
you really live up to your full potential, you don't have to tell anybody anything. They're going to see you walking within your purpose. They're going to see you reaching your potential, and they're going to be inspired by you and how you overcame the obstacles that have been placed in your path. Everybody out there, not everybody, but a lot of people are experiencing anxiety. And when we take off the mask, stop masking it, deal with it so that we can heal from it and really reach who we can be in life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going through that
Absolutely.
right now. All of that.
Yeah, I
What?
mean, I'll give you a recent
But
example. I competed January 31st, ran a slower 60 than I ran in high school. Like, like high school T would have whooped my tail. And afterwards, I like was on this little roller coaster because, trying to come back from all this stuff. And I was all sad. I was like, well, maybe I should retire, or maybe I don't even want to do it anymore. Like, I'm in a fortunate position to be good at a few other things that I could just go all into. So I was like, trying to decide all that. Anyway, my mental conditioning coach was like, or you just lost
Mm.
and you're too heavy. And I was like, yes, I am definitely too heavy. But what if this means I should retire? He was like, well, maybe first you should lose the weight, because you can't really make a judgment about your future if you haven't even gotten to your elite body. Like, so how are
Right.
you going to be making these calls when you haven't done all of the work to set yourself back up? So it's one thing to get down to 135 pounds, step out there, and then run 7.5. That's a different conversation than stepping out there at what is not your fighting weight, 20 pounds almost heavier, and then have the nerve to be like, oh, I didn't run fast. Like, what?
yeah, it
you
doesn't
didn't
make sense.
you didn't do the work.
Yeah.
So Samaya, what did you mean when you said you were going to start now? Like, what does that look like for you? What changes?
Well, a big part, and I'm glad you brought it up, for me has always been my diet. I'm very muscular, and that makes me heavy. And being a long jumper, you have to be light, you have to be bouncy, and having too much muscle mass, which could be good in the sprints, is a downfall for the jumps. So I'm really struggling right now with leaning up and trying to figure out what works for my body, because some things that work for my teammates on how they lose weight don't work with me. And right now I'm kind of in the process of trying to figure out what helps me with losing weight without straining myself, without making myself too lean to the point where I don't have any energy for practice and stuff like that. So that's
Mm-hmm.
one of the things. Leaning up and focusing my weight, and also building up a stronger mental, are like the two top things on my list right now that I know is going to help make a huge difference in my performance. And
I
those are
need to
Let
just
me
stop
things that
you
I'm
right there.
Let me ask you this. So Tianna mentioned right
right.
before we came on that, or just a minute ago, how strict and how time sensitive her diet is. And that's what you did in high school. Are you doing that
Mhm.
now? If you have to
Not
hesitate, then you're
exactly.
not.
No, the
Not
answer is
exactly.
no.
Not exactly.
So it's the
No.
same thing with
No.
what she said about the book. If you want it bad enough, then you would do it. You would at least be able to say, I'm taking the steps to do it. It doesn't mean that the weight will come off as easy, but you don't know if the weight will come off and do, like, what works for you. This is not a new thing. You know that your competition weight, your elite competition weight was always a certain number, right? And so you always leaned out before major competitions.
Mhm.
I want to stop her real quick, because she said something that is actually untrue. You don't have to be light to jump. That is not why I'm losing weight. I'm losing weight because I need my strength to weight ratio, my power ratio, to be as high as possible. And so where that means like if I go into the gym right now and power clean 200 pounds, which I can do at this current weight, I'm 146 right now, right? And I can get a little bit lighter and come back into the gym next week at 143 and power clean 200 pounds, that's good. But if I at 133 can no longer power clean 200 pounds, that's bad. So what you're looking for is how
Mm-hmm.
powerful can I be at the lightest weight I can be? Not just light for the hell of it. No,
Right.
no, no, no. We still need to generate force and power. You know that long jump takeoff requires aggression, violence, and energy. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not about being light. The more mass you have, the more force you produce. The issue is, can you get it so fine tuned that you are as powerful as possible while being as lean as you can be at that power number? So
Right.
that's what you're looking for. So
Okay.
you don't want to lose energy or strength in the process. And as we get older, that threshold gets higher. So what Coach Gibson is saying is like, you got to try, because it's all a grand experiment. You got to find out, you got to start the process, but you might learn that it's actually 5 pounds heavier than it ever used to be. And that's okay. It's not
Right.
actually about the number. It's
How you
just about
feel.
you, yeah, feeling and becoming, just getting that ratio just so, because that's what physics wants. Physics doesn't care that your scale says 120. It doesn't at all. It needs to, you
Right.
need to be able to execute the takeoff with the force required. And it's easier to do that when you are as powerful as hell, and as light as you can be at that power.
Right.
That's what we're working for.
And let's
Okay.
not just say it's muscle mass though, because
Right.
I'm just going to put it out there. You can slap me later, but stress eating. When you talk about the stress and the anxiety, I know you're a stress eater. I'm a stress eater too,
Same
and that's
here.
something that's an issue. And you've told me about times that you're stressed out and then you're nibbling. So it's getting that schedule and sticking to that schedule. Just like you have a practice schedule and you have 850s. You're not going to go out there and do 1250s just because you feel like it. So the same thing with your eating. If your eating is this many calories, you're not going to just go over that amount of calories just because you feel like it. You're going to stick to the diet or the plan that's been put in place for you with intention. You don't want to just go
Mm-hmm.
out there and stop eating or starve yourself because you're not going to have the energy output that Tianna's talking about. But with a nutritionist that you have, as most collegiate athletes have available to them, you can meet with a nutritionist and come up with a plan that works for you. But one thing that I do want to address while we're on this call is the emotional stress that weight puts on female athletes. I know that it's a major stressor. I went through the
Yes.
stress in college when I was competing and trying to. I remember my coach was like, he's Jamaican. He's like, the booty. And that's a big thing. Coaches, they just say that and they don't realize that, okay, I'm going home and now I'm self-conscious and I'm trying to figure out what to do.
Mm-hmm.
This is how
Yeah.
I look at it now. It's like, this is temporary. We all understand that this is temporary. This is the equivalent of fitting your like race car. Like, it's gonna, when you're just going to Target, if that's the life you're living, you don't need to worry about any of this. Your body is perfect, healthy. That's fine. This specific endeavor requires a specific body. And that's the only thing you need to look at it that way. This specific endeavor requires a specific body. Don't be emotional about it. Like, do the best you can to get it to those specifications, and let that be that. And when it's over, it's over. This, like, needing to lose or gain weight is not a reflection on you as a woman. Having more cuts in your muscles right now is what you need right now. Like, that's okay. It's not a critique on your femininity or your softness or whether you can move through the world gracefully. It's like, how badass is it that you have identified a goal and a path that you want to walk, and you are going to sculpt your body in such a way that you can make it do it at a high level. That's all this conversation about weight
Right.
is meant to do. Nothing else, nothing about insecurity or self-consciousness. It's like, we are all mechanics. Our bodies are the high performance vehicles. How fine-tuned can we tweak these settings to achieve this very specific goal, and then move on, and then move away from it?
Exactly. And like she said, this is temporary. So make this temporary
Sounds like
sacrifice
yeah.
for this year. It's Olympic year. If COVID, calms down and allows us to be great again. So make this sacrifice this year and then you'll deal with next year. You'll deal
Yep.
with if you're going to do the next four Olympics, but you can't focus on the fact that I got to do this for 5 more years because I'm going to, if I'm going to go to two Olympics, you got to go to the first Olympics first. Focus on the now, stay present in the moment, get through this year. Can you commit to a diet plan this year so that you can have the opportunity to see how great you can be, to see what your potential is? And it doesn't need to be a number like you threw out the 23 earlier. Just can you PR? Can you get a little
Yeah.
bit better every time that you jump? And if you take the pressure off of trying to jump 23 and just say, I'm going to PR, I'm going to get better, whether that's an inch or 6 inches or a foot, I'm going to get
Mm-hmm.
better the next time that I jump. And then the next time that I jump, I'm going to get better again. And to get better, I have these action steps. Like Tianna said, you putting the energy into the little action steps. So I want to get
Mm-hmm.
better. That's all. It's not about 23 feet. It's about getting better. I'm going to jump further than I've ever jumped before. To do that, I have to take these steps. I have to be intentional with what I'm eating, the fuel I'm putting into my body. So don't look at it as what you can't eat or a diet plan, but what should I put in my body to make this high performing machine be the best that it can be? What mental things will I do every day? Am I going to meditate every morning? Am I going to journal every day in the evening after practice? Those are things that you've done in the past. Am I going to do visualization? You just talked about watching film. Are you going to do those things? Make a list of the things that you did, like when you felt the best as an athlete, when you had your best performance. Relive that performance, close your eyes and see it, and then write down all the things that you did to get yourself to that performance, and then do those things. You
Yeah.
know it works for you.
Mm.
Look, I see the
That's
light. The
good.
light,
Yeah.
the light is coming on.
Look at, yeah, I see it too. Like her face looks
Yeah, I'm
different. She's
thinking
like,
like,
okay. She's like,
okay.
But you
okay.
have the power. You take ownership of your own success. Because at the end of the day, when you're 40, 50 years old, you're not going to be able to blame dad. You're not going to be able to blame coach. You're not going to be able to say
Exactly.
anybody else prevented you from doing what you're supposed to do. When you're talking to your
That's right.
children, you're gonna talk about what you did to take ownership and control of your own success.
That's right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Woo,
So
preach.
Yeah.
I
I
love what you said,
know.
Tiana, about the
Yes.
self-esteem with this whole weight thing. I want every female athlete or male athlete, because it is an issue for male athletes too, to
Oh,
understand
absolutely.
that this does not define you. When you start doing things that are contrary to your performance, like eating disorders, that's actually working against you. So
Yeah.
even if you
Mm-hmm.
hit the weight, you're not going to be performing well because you did it the wrong way. So making
Yeah.
sure that you don't put too much pressure on yourself, and you can talk to your high performance coach about the way that you feel about your weight, because a lot of times it's an underlying issue, emotional, that might be contributing to what's going on with your weight.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Maya, you
The
said you
mind
wanted
is
to
super
talk about
powerful.
COVID and the stress that's
Sorry.
going. Oh, go ahead, T.
I was gonna say the mind is super powerful. Like as a default, the mind is just powerful. It's up to us to turn it into an ally or an enemy. And it's how we decide that is in the little choices that we make. Because once the mind gets focused on something, it uses its power. And like just like every superhero and villain, they all have power. One's chosen for good, the other for bad. So we can
Bad.
decide where
Yeah.
to focus the power that we already have. Because it's gonna flex that power. It's up to you to point it in which direction it's going to do something. So give it something good to do, to fixate on.
Love that. Love that. Samaya, we're almost out of time, but I want you to address the question you had about COVID and additional stress and anxiety that has come up for a lot of athletes during this time of uncertainty.
Mm.
Okay, so yeah, a huge question that I have is I've always been the type of athlete that would work towards something. Like I would know, like, okay, Texas Readers is coming up, I'm working towards PRing here, or okay, I know NCAA's is coming up, I'm working toward PRing here. So not
Mm-hmm.
being in the know and still training your butt off, not being in the know, like how would you tell athletes during COVID, like to deal with that? Because I know it's hard because we don't know what's going to happen with sports because of
Mm-hmm.
COVID. So how would you say some good advice that you would give to athletes to help stay in that still same mindset and keep progressing through your workouts and your training while we're still in this pandemic?
So what I'm going to say is you can easily put it into the category of easier said than done. But at the end of the day, these things are actually simple, right? I have a calendar, and when I build my training program, I work backwards from the Olympics, work backwards from the trials, backwards. So everything that I'm doing today is with that big picture in mind. So what I do is I act as if. I got that from Jack Canfield, who wrote this amazing book called The Success Principles. It's incredible. I have to revisit it. I think every 2 years I read this book. Basically, this is what I do. I act as if the trials will happen on the date that they say they will happen. I act as if the Olympic Games will happen on the date that they say they will happen. I ignore every tweet, every news article that says otherwise until I get a definitive answer. Until then, I go to practice on February 12th, and I make sure my practice on February 12th is as good a practice as it can be. And then I go to bed, and then I show up on February 13th. Repeat, like over and over and over. Because if I get to June and there's an announcement that there's no Olympic trials, what have I lost? Like, for real, for real.
Nothing.
Not a thing. What have I gained? Discipline, a whole lot of character, hashtag body goals, most likely. Like, probably could go to a track and do a time trial and find out that I have actually improved in all the areas that I was working towards improving. So if you wanted to go to the trials to see if you could run 10:9, I'm pretty sure you can run that on a track somewhere. We can set up free lap cones and we can turn up, and I can make a fire playlist and get you hyped and see if you can run 10:9. So what have you lost? There is an event that is canceled, but you've lost nothing in preparing for it as if it were to happen. So again, like, you don't go into a meet focusing on the results, or you shouldn't. You don't go to training just because the Olympics will happen in August. That's not how that works. Because guess what? If we did that, none of us would go to practice unless we knew for sure we were getting a medal at the end of the summer. If that was really how it worked, with the end in mind, none of us would do anything unless we knew absolutely for sure how it was going to turn out in the end. But that's not the case. So just keep showing up. Your motivation doesn't need to be tied to that thing. If you want to see if you could have made the team, then we'll create a leaderboard, top 3 fastest time trial hundreds, long jump to whatever. You would have made the team, and you can still know that. You know what I mean? Top 3, ranked top 3 in the world. You can still know these things. So don't tie it so much to something you have zero control over, and just stay right here in the middle. Stay right here, head down, and train.
I love it. And what she just mapped out goes well with anxiety too. Taking it one day at a time, staying present in the moment. The only moment that exists is this moment. The only day that exists is this day. You don't even know if you're going to make it to tomorrow, like physically as a person. You talking about the Olympics, you don't know for sure that you're going to still be here. Look at how many people are passing away every single day. So only thing that you can control is right now. So give it your best today, every single day, and that will reduce the anxiety as well.
None of us would ever do anything.
I want to close out.
Go ahead.
Say that again, T. No, go ahead.
I was saying none of us would ever do anything if we needed 100% guarantee that whatever we were expecting was going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah. And they say that anxiety and depression, like they say, anxiety is worrying about the future, and depression is from worrying about the past. Like regretting what happened in the past contributes to depression. And if you stay present, then you can be more fully successful in the future because you're taking care of the present. But if you're in the future, you're not doing what you're supposed to in the present, so you'll never be where you're supposed to be in the future. When she mapped out February 12th, February 13th, February 14th, if she gets to August and she skipped a workout on February 13th, that's going to contribute to what happens in August, right? So staying here and doing those one day at a time. So, Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, they have the plan laid out, taking it one day at a time. And that's what helped me with grief a lot. It's just one day at a time, taking it moment by moment, not worrying about, like, when I got overwhelmed, like, I can't live like this for 20 years, without my child. Well, guess what? You may not have to live 20 years, but you got to live today. Make it through today. So whenever you're feeling anxiety, focus on the moment, connect to your breath, relax, breathe, take a moment to meditate. You don't have to be sitting down, laying down to meditate. You can meditate right where you are. You can meditate right at the run before you get on the runway,
Yep.
and just breathe in the moment. Tianna does yoga classes. I should have put that in there. So you still do your yoga classes on Saturday mornings?
I have a full online yoga studio now. So yeah, I have several classes a
Okay,
week.
and we'll put that in the comments with this. But let me tell you something. All yoga is not created equal. Ooh,
Nope.
baby, I took one of Tiana's classes, and you can go at the pace that you want, but I was feeling like I lifted some weights. I was like, ooh, baby, you're going to be fine after this.
Yes. Yes.
I want to end with on a fun note. I just want to ask you guys some rapid fire questions. So I'm like an old thespian. I took acting classes in college, and I love Inside the Actor Studio. And I don't know if people know what that
Me
is, but he
too.
always asks like the same question at the end. So I want to ask you guys a couple without thinking. Just respond, okay? So if you could be anything, any profession in the world that did not have to do with sports, what would your profession be, Tianna?
Doctor.
I would be like a performer, like a singer and a dancer. I would do that. I don't know
Okay.
why. Yeah.
Samaya, what is your favorite meal?
I like pasta. I like pasta. I like pasta.
Tianna, your favorite
Lamb
meal?
chop
Ooh,
Lamb chops
okay.
is good.
with mint
And then
jelly.
if you could be any animal other than a human being, what would you be?
Me?
Jaguar.
Oh, I like that. This is not really an animal, but I'm gonna say a unicorn. I love
Oh, okay.
unicorn. That I'd be unicorn.
Okay, okay. This has been so fun, you guys. I love it. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for tuning in to More Than a Coach. I want to just make a quick announcement. Tianna has just sent in the final draft of her personal memoir. Make sure that you guys look out for updates on how you can order her memoir. And TB, tell us your website. Go ahead and call it out.
TiannaB.com. So TiannaBee.com.
Wonderful blog. Tune into that. My foundation, doitfordamani.com. You can support. It's in honor of my beautiful son, Damani. And make sure that you subscribe to this YouTube channel. Share this video with someone else that can benefit. Thank you. Until next time.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.